It was supposed to be a routine welfare check. An old, forgotten house at the edge of a sleepy town. The neighbors had complained. No one had seen Mrs. Eleanor for weeks. The curtains stayed shut, no footsteps, no phone calls, just silence, and the occasional echo of something strange, a voice, not human, not exactly. When Officer Daniel pushed open the creaking door, he expected loneliness, decay, maybe even tragedy. What he didn't expect was to be stared down by a parrot, perched regally on a worn-out armchair, beside a blanket-covered body. The bird didn't flinch. His eyes were ancient, his presence commanding. He looked straight into the officer's soul and spoke, in a croaky but clear voice, "She's sleeping. Be quiet. If you believe some bonds are stronger than time, this story is for you." The parrot's feathers were faded, but still bore hints of vibrant green and golden yellow. His claws clung to the arm of the chair like roots to the earth. He didn't move, didn't blink as Officer Daniel stepped closer. The room was frozen in time. Dust clung to every surface. A record player sat silent in the corner. Doilies and framed photographs spoke of another era, of a life once rich in stories and music. And then there was her, Eleanor, frail, still, with a faint smile etched on her lips. She was gone, but in her passing, she wasn't alone. Beside her, the bird had remained, a silent sentinel. No food in days, no fresh water, just loyalty. Later, the neighbors would swear that Parrot had been with Eleanor for as long as they could remember. Some even claimed he'd belonged to her late husband, a veteran who died decades ago. Others said the bird had been there before even that, whispering secrets, repeating memories no one else could recall. When the paramedics confirmed her death, Daniel didn't know what to do with the parrot. He wasn't chipped, no paperwork, no name tag, just him, aged, alone, and now without the only person he'd ever known. If you believe in second chances, this story is for you. Officer Daniel wasn't from around there. Transferred just a few months prior, he was still getting used to the slow rhythm of the small town where people waved from porches and gossip traveled faster than sirens. At 34, he was calm, practical, and rarely rattled. But something about that house, that bird, clung to him. Eleanor's home was a time capsule, a modest white cottage with ivy creeping along the porch railings and a crooked mailbox that still bore the last name Green. Inside, the scent of old wood, lavender, and something faintly sweet lingered in the air. Photos on the mantelpiece told quiet stories. A young Eleanor in a 1950s dress, dancing with a man in uniform, the same couple decades later smiling in a garden, and always in the background, perched quietly, him, the parrot. They called him Jacob, though no one remembered exactly why. He'd been there so long he felt like part of the house itself. Most assumed he was a pet, a relic, something ornamental, but Jacob had seen everything, and now he was alone. As the sun dipped below the horizon that evening, Daniel stood by the doorway, uncertain. The bird was watching him, head tilted, eyes sharp, almost as if asking, "What now?" News travels fast in a small town. By morning, Eleanor's passing and the strange parrot left behind were all anyone could talk about. "He's creepy," said one neighbor. "Probably diseased," muttered another. "I heard he talks like her husband, like he's possessed or something." At the station, Officer Daniel was met with raised eyebrows when he returned with the bird in a cardboard box. "You serious?" chuckled a fellow officer. "You brought that thing here?" But Daniel couldn't explain it. There was something about Jacob, something more. Still, no one wanted him. Animal control refused. The shelter said they had no space, especially not for an old, possibly aggressive parrot. "He bit one of the EMTs," someone pointed out. The decision came down from above. "He's evidence. Keep him for 48 hours, then do what you have to." So Jacob ended up in a small holding room at the back of the station, perched on a repurposed broomstick, staring at the fluorescent lights. He didn't squawk, didn't flap, But when the room fell quiet at night, some swore they could hear him murmuring Eleanor's name. To most, he was a problem, an echo of something gone, a relic too strange to keep and too stubborn to let go. It was late, past midnight, when Daniel found himself walking down the hallway toward the holding room again. He wasn't on duty. He wasn't even sure why he was there. Maybe it was the way the bird had looked at him, not with fear, not with anger, but with understanding, recognition, as if Jacob saw something inside Daniel even he hadn't noticed. He opened the door quietly. Jacob was awake, perched silently, eyes locked on the door, before it even creaked open. For a long moment they just stared at each other. "You shouldn't be here," Daniel muttered to himself, but he didn't leave. Instead, he pulled up a chair and sat. Jacob tilted his head. Then, with slow, deliberate clarity, he spoke. "Daniel, you okay?" Daniel's breath caught in his throat. He hadn't told anyone about the conversation he'd had with Eleanor a few months ago, the one night he visited her home after a noise complaint. She'd invited him in for tea, talked to him like a grandmother would, listened as he shared more than he ever meant to. "Daniel, you okay?" she had asked that night too. He hadn't answered then. And now, here was this bird, speaking her voice, her words, into the silence. A shiver passed through him. This wasn't just mimicry. Jacob wasn't just repeating sounds. He was remembering and watching. Outside, the wind picked up. Leaves rustled against the windows, and for a split second, Daniel felt it in his chest. Something was coming, something just beyond the quiet. And Jacob already knew. The next morning, the air in the station felt heavier. No one said anything, but everyone moved a little slower, checked over their shoulders, as if the walls were listening. Daniel passed by the holding room again. Jacob was perched exactly where he had been, unmoving, but his feathers were puffed slightly, his eyes darting to the window again and again. Outside, dark clouds were gathering. An early summer storm, the forecast said. But Jacob had started shifting before the first rumble, before the first wind. He sensed something. At one point, when Daniel walked by, Jacob suddenly let out a long, low whistle, one that echoed through the hall like a warning. Officer Rachel, seated nearby, rolled her eyes. "That thing gives me the creeps," she muttered. "It's like he knows something." Daniel didn't answer, but he felt it too. Later, while sorting paperwork, Daniel pulled out an old photo he'd taken from Eleanor's house. In the background, next to a Christmas tree from decades ago, was Jacob, just as he looked now, unaged, alert, the same stare, the same knowing gaze. Something was wrong, and Jacob was trying to tell him. By mid-afternoon, the sky had turned an unnatural shade of green-gray. The wind whipped violently through the empty streets, rattling windows and tearing at tree branches. Locals were used to storms, but not like this. A sudden, blaring emergency alert interrupted the quiet hum of the station. "Severe storm warning. Possible tornado formation in the region. Seek immediate shelter." Officers scrambled. Radios buzzed. Lights flickered. And Jacob was screaming. Not just calling, screaming. He flapped violently inside his room, his wings beating the air with frantic rhythm. His voice, raw and panicked, repeated a single word again and again. "Run! Run! Run!" Daniel rushed to the room. "What's wrong with him?" But the moment he stepped inside, Jacob went silent. His chest heaved. He looked Daniel straight in the eyes and whispered, "Basement." It hit Daniel like a punch. The building had an old storm shelter in the basement, unused, forgotten. Most officers had already taken cover in the interior hallway, but Jacob, he was pointing his beak toward the stairwell. Suddenly the lights cut. A deep, unnatural roar filled the air, like a freight train tearing through the walls. Daniel didn't think. He grabbed Jacob, still perched on the broomstick, and bolted down the stairs. Behind him, glass shattered. Metal groaned. The sound of the station being ripped apart echoed down into the earth, and then darkness. The shelter was pitch black, save for the dim glow of Daniel's phone screen. Dust fell from the ceiling with every tremor. Outside, the world howled like it was being torn in two. Jacob stood silently on a crate, still and calm now, as if his panic had served its purpose, as if he'd fulfilled some kind of duty. Daniel sat on the floor, breathing heavily, trying to process what had just happened. How had he known? The sirens had given them only seconds. The town's alert system hadn't caught the funnel forming until it was nearly too late, but Jacob had sensed it hours earlier. He remembered the way the bird had stared at the sky through the window, the way he whistled, the agitation, the sharp, sudden change in his voice. He had tried to warn them, and no one had listened. Now, down in the basement, as the storm above raged and clawed at the earth, the only sound was Jacob's quiet, rhythmic breathing beside him. Not a sound from outside, just wind and destruction. And in the stillness, Daniel realized something he hadn't before. Jacob hadn't just stayed with Eleanor out of loyalty. He had been protecting her. For 70 years, he had been her eyes, her ears, her quiet guardian. And now, somehow, he had done the same for him. The storm's fury intensified above them. Daniel held his breath as debris slammed against the shelter door. He checked his phone. No signal, no updates. Just darkness, and the vibrating growl of something massive moving overhead. And then, thud. Something heavy had fallen across the exit. The shelter door wouldn't budge. Daniel pushed, grunted, tried to force it open. Nothing. They were trapped. "Great," he muttered, pacing. "No reception, no help, and now Jacob suddenly flew up, startling him. The bird landed near the narrow grate near the ceiling, an old ventilation shaft about the width of a loaf of bread. Jacob pecked at it, clawing, then looked back at Daniel and repeated, "Help! Help!" It wasn't a cry for rescue. It was an order. Daniel froze. "Wait! Are you—" Jacob called again, louder this time. "Help! Help! Basement!" Realization dawned like lightning. Jacob wasn't just mimicking Eleanor, he was mimicking Daniel, his voice, his cadence, the way Daniel himself had once shouted during a past emergency. He remembered that moment. It had been in this very town, months ago. The bird was imitating Daniel's voice calling for help from the basement. Jacob flew back and forth, pressing his beak to the grate, repeating the same sentence with perfect urgency. "Help! Basement! Help!" He was trying to reach the outside, to call for them. Again and again he called, unrelenting, focused. Daniel stood still, watching this small, aging creature do the one thing no human had thought of. Jacob wasn't just reacting to danger, he was fighting it with every instinct he had. Minutes passed, then an hour. Jacob didn't stop. His throat rasped from overuse, but still he mimicked Daniel's voice. Urgent, desperate, precise, over and over. "Help! Basement! Help!" Daniel offered him water, but the parrot refused to rest. He knew what was at stake. Every second mattered. Then, just as Daniel was beginning to lose hope, a faint voice answered. "Daniel? That you?" It was Officer Rachel, muffled, far away but getting closer. Jacob shrieked in response, wings flapping as he called louder, faster. "Help! Basement!" A thud above, scraping, then a beam of light pierced through the ventilation shaft. "We hear you!" Rachel shouted. A moment later, the shelter door groaned. Daniel pushed with all his strength as hands from the outside pulled. Debris shifted, daylight broke through, and at last they were out. Daniel stumbled into the sunlight, shielding his eyes. The station building was half collapsed. Vehicles flipped. Trees downed, but the rest of the team was safe. They'd found cover, and it was Jacob alone, who had made sure Daniel survived. The moment he emerged, Jacob perched silently on Daniel's shoulder. The officers stared, jaws slack. "That bird called for help," one whispered. Jacob blinked, then with weary but unwavering pride let out a final clear phrase, "Good boy, Jacob." And for the first time, Daniel smiled. The town never looked at Jacob the same way again. What was once dismissed as an old, useless bird now became a local legend. People who had feared him, mocked him, or ignored his presence now told stories in hushed tones, in awe of what he had done. They came to see him, some bringing fruit, others just to say thank you. But Jacob didn't care about the attention. He stayed close to Daniel. After the storm, Daniel didn't return Jacob to the holding room. He brought him home, bought him a proper perch, built him a space near the window, and placed Eleanor's old blanket beside it. Jacob never spoke much after that, not like before, just soft whistles, gentle coos, as if he had finally said all he needed to. Daniel, though, spoke to him often, and sometimes, when he wasn't paying attention, Jacob would repeat his words in the quiet, not as an echo, but as a companion. One evening, Daniel pulled out the photo again, the one from Eleanor's house. He looked at it, then at Jacob. The same bird, decades apart. "You've always protected her, haven't you?" he whispered. Jacob turned his head slightly, as if answering. "You've got a place here now," Daniel added softly. "You're not just a pet. You're family." From then on, every day started with Daniel placing a small seed treat near Jacob's perch, and every night ended with Jacob watching over the house, still, silent, and forever loyal. In the world where everything fades, where time erases names, faces, and even memories, some bonds endure. Jacob wasn't just a bird. He was a guardian, a keeper of stories, a reminder that loyalty doesn't wear out with age, and that even the most overlooked among us may carry a heart brave enough to face the storm. For 70 years, he stood by someone who needed him, and when that chapter ended, he didn't stop. He stepped into a new role, a new life, without hesitation, without being asked. He simply knew, and maybe, just maybe, that's what purpose really is. Not something we choose, but something that chooses us. If this story moved something inside you, tell me in the comments. What do you think kept Jacob going? Was it memory or love? And if you believe that every creature has a reason to be here, share this story with someone who needs to hear it, because sometimes the quietest lives echo the loudest truths.